Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this extraordinary meeting of the Licensing and Protection Committee here in the ground floor on the Constable and Bourne rooms at Pathfinder House. Can I remind you that the meeting, as all meetings, is being live streamed for public consumption. And we will move on to the agenda. The other thing just to mention is that we don't have microphones in this room, so please keep your voices at a reasonably high level so that it can be heard on live stream. Thank you. Firstly, can we take apologies for absence, please?
Yeah, I have apologies from Councillor Howell and Councillor Bywater and Councillor Criswell as well, as he's not here.
Thank you. Moving on to item 1, which is members' interests. To receive from members declarations as to disposable, pecuniary, other registrable and non-registrable interests in relation to any agenda item. Do we have any declarations of interest, members, please?
No.
No? No interest to declare? Thank you. Moving on then to the main item on the agenda, which is item 2, the Public Space Protection Order for Amesbury. Consider the report by the Community Protection and Enforcement Leader setting out a proposal for a public space protection order for Amesbury, and this also being Ash Downing. Tommy, apologies. Ash, so over to you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for meeting for this extraordinary meeting. It felt as if it was too important to wait until the next committee meeting. So I'll go through the report and give a summary on each section. If anyone wants me to drill down on this bit more detail, feel free to ask any questions we go through. So, starting off then, the reason for the meeting today is to discuss the Public Spaces Protection Order that's being proposed for Amesbury. A Public Spaces Protection Order is a statutory duty within Huntingdon Judicial Council's ability in the Anti-Social Behaviour Private Policing Act 2014. The Public Spaces Protection Order allows us to put in any requirements or which may be conditions to do something or to refrain from doing something in a public space within a designated location. In this particular case, we're looking at a small part of Amesbury, not the whole of Amesbury, and in particular this part of Amesbury which has been affected by specific antisocial behaviours, which hopefully be covered in the conditions. The breach of a public spaces protection order is a criminal offence and can be dealt with either through fixed penalty notice, which is currently set at £100, or through prosecution. Prosecution can receive, a person who's prosecuted can receive a fine of up to £1,000. So the recommendations which the councillors will be asked to consider today is whether to approve the proposed PSPO for Amesbury, whether the proposed PSPO location outlined in Appendix A is suitable, whether the proposed PSPO conditions outlined in Appendix B are suitable, whether the PSPO for Amesbury should be put in place for 3 years with an annual review, which would be an internal review, and whether to delegate authority to the Chief Operating Officer in consultation with the portfolio holder with responsibility for community services to make minor amendments or variations to the condition and scope of this PSPO. So going over basically the background then, members of the public living in Amesbury around the areas of Berkeley Street and Buckley Road and the church next door to it have been experiencing antisocial behaviour which include intimidating behaviour, use of drugs and alcohol, abuse, violence between members of the public, and sleeping in the churchyards next to the Nag's Head Hotel. A lot of the behaviours, well, pretty much all of the behaviours have been attributed to guests staying at the Nag's Head Hotel, which is a hotel which is used by lots of local authorities a number of local authorities, I should say, for temporary accommodation. HDC and the police have been working together to tackle some of the issues so far, and in particular HDC has been working with the Nag's Head Hotel to address the issues. In particular, HDC have been pushing for other local authorities who use the hotel to be sharing their risk assessments with the police and HDC for the guests they're placing at the location. The PSPO is currently seen as the most appropriate tool to deal with the behaviours in the community. The behaviours that are dealt with, the behaviours that occur within the property of the Nag's Head is being dealt with by both the Nag's Head Hotel and the police on a case-by-case situation, whereas what we're currently looking at is specifically the behaviours that occur within the public spaces around it. So, whilst addressing those behaviours, we've considered a number of ways of dealing with the behaviour, and I've listed in section 3 options considered. The options I've put in here, I've stuck to the options that are available within the antisocial behaviour legislation, which are within my ability to comment on. Other options have also been used outside of my profession, including supportive options and options in other statutory bodies. But just for this purpose of the public space protection order, I've just stuck to the options within the legislation, which is within the ability for me to comment on. So option 1, which is the preferred option that we looked at, is a public spaces protection order. The main reason being that it allows us to essentially criminalise certain antisocial behaviours and have a prompt response. As I'll cover later in option 3, some of the other options within the legislation take quite a long time to get a resolution to, whereas a public spaces protection order allows an immediate response to antisocial behaviour, whether that's through a fixed penalty notice or prosecution. So that's why it's currently seen as the best response to behaviours. Option 2 was a closure order for the Nag's Head, which would allow the local authority of the police to close the premises, which some of you may have seen in the consultation results has been what's been asked for by some members of the public. But that would obviously have quite a significant adverse effect on the ability to use the premises to house vulnerable people who are facing homelessness. And there's the wider issues of what to do once the closure order expires, because ultimately the Nag's Head is operating legally as a hotel. Option 3 would be direct enforcement, so using the powers within the antisocial behaviour legislation to issue community protection notices. This is our most used antisocial behaviour power across the board when we're dealing with antisocial behaviour generally. The reason why that's not considered particularly effective in this particular case, despite being our most used power, is because before getting to any final resolution, you need to go through a series of issuing warnings, then notice, and then court. And of course, because we're talking about a population which is predominantly transient and temporary, by the time we get to any proper enforcement, so to speak, they have likely left the area anyway, so you don't have that immediate response. So moving on to risks then, for the public spaces protection order. The anticipated risks have been laid out in here, and I'll go into them in brief. Again, if anyone wants to comment on them in more detail, feel free. So the first risk is quite simple. The fact is that the PSPO could be unsuccessful in having any lasting change in the area. It's worth noting that there is the risk that through either issues such as lack of judicial support resulting in low penalties or not a sufficient resource allocated to enforcement of it, those who are causing the ASB may not be deterred from acting in an antisocial way. Hopefully that's not the case, but it's a risk worth noting. The next risk that's been noted is the reputational risk of having a public spaces protection order, because some people may see this as targeting homeless people through enforcement, which can be controversial. And in the guidance, the antisocial behaviour guidance, it's quite clear that public spaces protection orders shouldn't be used to target homelessness specifically. That being said, in the designing of the public spaces protection order, we have been quite careful not to do that. There's nothing in the public spaces protection order and nothing in HDC's enforcement elsewhere that targets rough sleeping or homelessness specifically. In this public spaces protection order, you'll see one of the conditions, which is specifically around setting up encampments on the churchyard. That's not to criminalise rough sleeping, that's specifically the impacts that tents being put on the graveyard is having on the victims there. And lastly, the public space protection order has to be signposted to let people know that the public space protection order is in place. There is a risk that in doing so could highlight this particular area of Amesbury as a hotspot location for antisocial behaviour, and there could be subsequent knock-on effects of that reputation. Again, hopefully not the case, but a potential risk worth highlighting. So timetable for implementation, I've listed in here the timetable so far around the public consultation starting on the 31st of May and ending on the 14th of June. The report submission to Licensing Protection Committee on the 18th of June and the committee meeting today. After today's committee meeting, if the committee approves the public space protection order, the next steps will be going to HDC's legal and then to the Chief Operating Officer to sign off the public space protection order. As soon as that's done, the public space protection order will then be put in place with immediate effect. So in theory, over the next few days, if approved, the public space protection order will be in place in Amesbury. So we're looking at quite a quick turnaround on this one. So consultation, as previously briefly mentioned, we consulted between the 31st of May and the 14th of June. We went out to the public via initial through canvassing. We did door knocks to let people know that the consultation was live. We left residents with information leaflets to inform them of the consultation. And we had a website on the HDC webpage which allowed people to know that the consultation was in place. And that website was linked on the leaflet as well. The website then further linked to a Microsoft Forms for people to fill out to give their feedback on. During the consultation period, of that 2-week period, we had 48 people respond to the consultation, which is quite a good response. And of those 48 respondents, 47 of them fully supported the public space protection order. The only person who didn't support the public space protection order, they felt as though it unfairly targeted homeless people. One person said they disagreed with the location suggested, but that was on the basis that they felt as though it should cover a wider area. Other than that, everyone agreed with both the conditions and the location proposed. So legal implications, I won't go into too much detail here, but in the legal implications, I just list the various acts of legislation that cover the local authorities' ability to put a public space protection order in place, how long for, and how to enforce it. So I'll probably skip over that one quite quickly unless anyone wants to comment on the legal stuff. Okay, so resource implications. So Cambridgeshire Constabulary are the organisation that originally applied for the public space protection order for Amesbury, and as part of that application they also committed to supporting it with enforcement. They intend to patrol the area, both a neighbourhood policing team and a separate policing unit, and they plan to target the behaviours both proactively and reactively. Aside from that, HDC's Community Protection and Enforcement team will also support with the enforcement, predominantly through responsive enforcement. So if a member of the public reports antisocial behaviour in that location to the council, my team will pick that report up and will gather any evidence that's available for them and look to either issue a fixed penalty notice or prosecute. To support with the enforcement, HDC are also applying for a deployable CCTV camera, which will be sited on a nearby lamppost and cover the main problematic location. It's a mobile CCTV camera, so it can be repositioned to cover any issues if needed. Funding has been secured for it, and that will be for an initial 6 months, but may be extended if felt needed. HDC CCTV department will conduct 24-hour monitoring of the CCTV camera, and HDC and the HDC's Community Protection Enforcement team and the police will have access to the footage on if they request it. A3 signage has been quoted for and printed, so the resource for that was £104.40. That was for HDC's approved supplier for signage. And for additional resource, HDC and the police will be meeting monthly to hold reviews of the enforcement of the PSPO to keep track of how that's going. That will feed into the annual reviews. So the reason for the recommended decision is quite simply that we feel as though this is the most appropriate way to respond to the antisocial behaviour in that particular location. That is the report in summary, and I'm happy to answer any questions or comments.
So, members, questions for Ash? Let's start with Councillor Terry.
Thank you for a very comprehensive report. As the councillor for Ainsbury, I have spoken to the residents down there, and although they're 100% behind you and the proposals you put in place, what worries them is that this has been going on for 2 years. Now, admittedly, you've only come in the last 2 or 3 months on this. What they'd asked me is what happens if these proposals are ignored by the residents or ignored by the owners of the next head. What is the likelihood of us having the power to shut it? And I realise that if you shut it, you simply move the problem somewhere else. But as long as it's outside of Ainsbury, they really don't give 2 monkeys.
Sure. So there's certain parts of that question that is outside of my profession to particularly answer, but what I can say is that the monthly reviews that we'll be having with the police is part of capturing the effectiveness of the public space protection order. What we're keen to not do is just to have it in place and wash our hands and say, there you go, done. If it's not working, then we're quite happy to say it's not working, it's not having an impact, and we will pivot to try and respond in another way. So within the antisocial behaviour legislation, I've previously mentioned there are other options, such as a closure order. Within the antisocial behaviour legislation, and that's the only way that I'm personally aware of how to close a premises, then that does have limitations. So a closure order, for instance, is a temporary response. You can only close a premises for up to 3 months. So we would have to then look at, in that 3-month period, what are we going to do with the location after these 3 months have passed.
So it's not a permanent inclusion.
Not in the antisocial behaviour legislation, and that's the only method I'm able to really comment on, because that's the only one within my profession to know of. All I can say is that there's been meetings I've been involved in from other HC departments, including planning and housing, and at the moment, and for the foreseeable, the hotel has been acting within its lawful right. It's a commercial property which is acting as a hotel, and as a private commercial property, it's choosing to prioritise the accommodation for local authorities. So there is no planning breach as far as I've been informed. So that being said, as I started with, if there was any other powers that we can use within our ability and the police jointly, we will do if the PSPO isn't working. This is the other stuff I'm not really able to comment on.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, some of it you've actually just answered from Councillor Manx. So just a clarification, the Manx House is a private hotel.
Yes.
It's owned by, got a private landlord.
Yep.
So are there no measures that we can enforce upon his licence? If he's not, is he conforming to his licence, I suppose?
So when we have been engaging with the Manx Head as an organisation, again, this is not necessarily me who's been doing that engagement, so it's hard for me to comment on it fully, but the Manx Head have been complying with what they need to be doing. They are evicting people when they need to evict people, which has led to then part of the reason why people then camp in the churchyard next door to it. They are enforcing what they need to enforce. The public spaces around the hotel is frankly outside of their remit, which is the reason why we're coming in with the PSPO.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And I suppose one of the other things I'm wondering is just how effective are these orders? They must have been in other places, and are they effective?
They can be, yeah, absolutely. So I've got examples of other local authorities who've used public spaces protection orders to great effect for all kinds of things. It could be bins, it could be, but we currently have one for dogs. And our dog PSPO has quite a few different types of conditions around dog control, and we do use it to good effect. a public space protection order is similar to a bylaw in a sense. So really the effectiveness of a public space protection order is how effectively it's used locally. So its effectiveness kind of reflects on how it's used, I suppose.
Okay, my final question is, I'm sure you have other questions, but just, I mean, you said you got 48 responses?
Mhm.
Just for open and transparency, 48 responses out of how many? You know, is that out of 100?
Okay, so,
how do we
yeah.
get that in proportion with things?
Sure. It's hard to say really because it was a public consultation, so anyone could have responded. We covered, so I'll remind myself on the map. So we canvassed the areas of Berkeley, Buckley, Luke Street, Montague, Hope Road, School Lane. So we covered as much of the location as possible. And when people did answer the door, we posted the leaflets through. It was also available on our website, and we spoke to a lot of residents. So we all had a bit of resident meeting on the street really, and we were really encouraging word of mouth to spread on it as well. So yes, it's hard to say exactly because we didn't go out to a fixed number of people. We didn't say we're going to consult with 100 people before they responded. We consulted with as many people as possible, essentially.
It's just really for open transparency, so we know as a district council that we are doing everything possible to reach people and have the consultation. Thank you. That's all I've got.
Councillor Stokes.
Can I just check, Chair, that we're going to move to debate after this? This is just questions, yeah? Are we going to have a debate? Because there's some comments I want to make, but it would be more appropriate for us.
So the floor is open for questions or comments.
Thank you. So just off the back, thank you. I'd like to speak in debate, that's all. I don't want to miss my opportunity, as sometimes happens when we go through all the questions and then we go to the vote. So as a question to Ashley, Councillor Jordan mentioned licensing the hotel. I don't think any of the activities at the hotel are licensed, are they? They're not licensed. No, so they're not required for alcohol. They're not serving alcohol there. They're not serving food there, and so it's not a licensable activity. So our responsibility or our ability to withdraw licenses, I think, is restricted. I would imagine. I'm not.
Outside of my remit to comment, I don't know, but I do know they don't serve food, they don't serve alcohol.
So this committee, we don't talk about those licenses, do we? It's music, it's alcohol, it's food. They don't do those things, which, you know, lots of hotels do. I might probably think that this is not a standard type of hotel,
But presumably it's environmental.
all of those things, environmental health, yeah, we have all those measures, but just licensing is not one of them, I think. Sorry, that was my question.
Thank you. Councillor Cadwallader, please.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I think the report is quite comprehensive, and what you said is quite important. My question is, because you mentioned that these people are being put there by the local authorities, right? And now, these people, that means they are known by the local authorities. Why is it that the local authorities, when these people are out, what is making them not being really homed somewhere else?
So a lot of them are rehomed elsewhere. I think what's probably worth mentioning is that in a lot of these cases, it's the loud and problematic minority. Most people are moved on to other accommodation, and that's not obviously focused on because that's not the problem. And even the individuals who are problematic and who are addicted but still hang around as street homeless, they do continue to get support. So even in cases where HDC have completely relinquished their duty of care to that individual because of repeat offences or repeat infringements, they still continue to get support from other external services, including charitable services like P3 and other homelessness support agencies. So yeah, I suppose in short, they are being done. It is very much temporary accommodation.
Thank you.
Councillor Patel.
I just want to ask, I know that you're mentioning here fixed penalty notices and an ultimate fine of £2,500 if it goes to court. We don't really have any realistic chance of getting any of that money, do we? Because once they've been fined and they don't pay it, they'll come back and do it the next day because they know they can't pay it.
It's a fair comment. It's one of the problems I mentioned it's sort of in the risks in terms of judicial support, because when you have people in temporary accommodation, it stands to reason that they probably don't have a lot of money. So it's one of the conversations I've already had with the police about effective enforcement. I don't imagine we'll be issuing fixed penalty notices for most offences. We'd be looking to go to court for prosecution in most cases. And the more severe, the severity of the punishment will probably reflect on the recurrence of the offending, which is, we've had similar issues in other HDC locations, not necessarily linked to temporary accommodation, but street drinking, street life issues. Is the low level behaviour can sometimes be difficult to enforce through court, and it tends to have to be the weight of numbers and the prosecuting legal team's ability to express the issue.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much. Just a clarification really, under 8.4 CCTV camera, you've got there a cost of £1,800 for 6 months.
Yep.
Has the district council agreed to fund that for a whole 3-year period or only for 6 months?
So at the moment, the initial £1,800 is going to be paid for using funds, I think, from our fixed penalty notice amount. But then we're hoping that will then be paid back through, basically we'll get that money back through some grant money we're looking at. After the 6 months, I think if the PSPO is continuing to be enforced effectively, then we will probably look to either obtain further grant funding or further internal funding for that. If it works, it's worth the money, essentially. We just put down 6 months initially just to see how it goes and see how effective it is. We wouldn't want to commit to paying for 12 months of a CCTV camera that doesn't work particularly well.
Councillor Stella.
Yes, just sort of moving on from that, what kind of support are you getting from the other districts in placing people there? Can't they pay towards the CCTV and whatever other costs that we're incurring as a district council? Because, you know, they're partly at fault because they are placing their problems in our area.
Yeah, it's an interesting comment. There's probably a lot to consider around that because we are, I think the HD's housing department in particular are engaging with the other local authorities and putting a lot of emphasis on them around sharing information and making sure they house appropriate people, not high-risk people. But I can definitely raise that as a comment when they have those meetings. My initial thoughts with the other counterpoints that I could see coming up is that arguably we do the same. We do house temporary accommodation guests in other local authorities, I imagine. Again, it's outside of my expertise to comment on that too much because I'm not housing, obviously. But I can, certainly raise it. It's a fair comment to consider.
So part of my portfolio is also operational housing, and the situation is that local authorities are legally obliged to place people in temporary accommodation inside their own authority if they can, and what happens is they use other places as overflow. So as you can imagine, it's probably not a constant demand, and there will be times when we will have to, if all the temporary accommodation was full in Huntingdonshire, we'd have to place people elsewhere. Those authorities still have a duty of care towards the residents as if they were in their own accommodation. But obviously we can't do much apart from informal contact between councils to make sure that's enforced. If you read through some of the comments, those are some of the concerns, is that some of the people, some of the family cohorts placed from other authorities are not getting the correct support. Now, you know, those authorities have to look after their own people, they have to have suitable support in place, but we don't have it. We don't inherit those people because they're placed in our authority. And so, and when it comes down to it, it's a private guest house. You can take, you know, money from anywhere. So we don't have any, that's part of the problem here, is we don't have any control other than the people we place there ourselves. Yeah, I think we do have appropriate safeguarding, and we have proper support systems in place, but we can't control what other authorities do, and that's quite unfortunate. That's one of the unfortunate things about this.
Councillor Patel, please. Councillor Patel,
I just want to ask, this is a delicate subject, but are we housing illegal immigrants in this
No, that's a different, those schemes are done under, they're different schemes.
Right, okay.
So like the people who were in the Dolphin Hotel, for example, were asylum seekers, and those are housed differently. These are people, I think these are people, I'm fairly sure these people who are just, people who are either in temporary accommodation because they've been homeless, or maybe people who've been released from prison, or maybe they've been in hospital, or there might be section. So it's that kind of cohort, and it's not generally, I think, actually, it's not generally people who would be regarded as asylum seekers.
But it's not part of that scheme.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. This is just also a clarification, depending on what we decide this afternoon, given that the CCTV's got only 6 months. Will it be reviewed again in 6 months then, and will it come back to this committee?
Okay, so we'll be reviewing things on a monthly basis, at least in terms of the effectiveness. Whether or not the committee wants to be informed in the next committee meeting on the progress, I'm happy to give an update report if you'd like.
That would be good.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments? Do we have any comments or questions specifically about the location of the PSPO and the conditions that are going to apply to it and the need to audit?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, as I've said, I've spoken to the residents. They were extremely worried until I pointed out some of what Ash has said, which I think, knowing that myself and the other Edgebed councillors are, shall we say, looking after them, has helped. But as I said earlier, their concern is what happens if it doesn't work. And of course, none of us know that. And that's why I'm trying to assure the residents that this will be ongoing. It's not just a one-off. And hopefully it will work. But, and I did actually mention that I would keep an eye on this and maybe get you back and have a review in 6 months. And they seem quite happy with that. And after all, it's the residents that are suffering.
Maybe I could answer that, Councillor Terry, if that's okay, actually. So Councillor Taylor, who's also arranged for ward councillor on South, and me, and various mayors, since we've changed mayors, have met with these group of residents twice, and I must say that this is an entirely reasonable group of residents, who understand the need for these places, and have been very tolerant and patient, I think, in all that's gone on. And when you look through the responses, you see that 90% of people feel intimidated, 90% of people feel scared. That's quite serious allegation. So we've met with a group of a group of residents twice now. What I offered to do at the last meeting was to meet with them 1 month after this public space protection order, if it is put in place, is operational. So we will review it then, because I think you can see from their responses they're all very supportive of this, but there is some amount of cynicism that it won't work. Now, from on the other side of that, we've put these PSPOs in place in town centres, and they have been successfully implemented. So I think all we can really do is just try it first and see how it works. And so I think Ash and the enforcement team have knocked on almost every door in the area, so they're also aware of who's going to be enforcing this, as well as the police. But I think we just have to try and see how it happens. But we will have regular contacts. Councillor Taylor as a ward member and me, portfolio holder. So I think that's the best we can do at the moment, is try and see what happens and listen to their concerns as we go on.
Yeah, I agree, Chair. I think that's going to be one of the key. Good communication all round is going to be the key to this, I think, working together.
Yes, I'm very concerned about the fact that Ash was saying he doesn't think if it doesn't work, they'll just turn their noses up it and then they'll come back because they're not worried about paying because they haven't got no money. And my biggest fear is that there's a school nearby, the residents are worried, and if we don't implement something that's quite strong and something happens, we would feel absolutely awful as a committee that we haven't done something that we feel would do it. And Councillor Stevenson said, well, we'll just have to see, bite the bullet and see what happens. And, so obviously I think that was the way forward, but it's a worrying aspect to think that we're waiting for something to happen dramatic,
Because I think we're also waiting and hoping that this will work. So I would say that we're not necessarily waiting for anything dramatic to happen before we act, because as soon as this is implemented, if it's implemented, we'll start acting. On all of the low-level payers that breach those conditions, we will be responding to them. The hope is that by doing that, it will avoid the let's wait and see.
So will the police be there regularly going around?
We've got two policing teams who said that they will patrol the area, and the chief of police and the police and crime commissioner are both very aware of the situation, and they provided their full support for the public space protection order, which you'll see in Appendix C. So I'm confident that we're, as an enforcement agency, doing everything we can.
Thank you.
Can I just say as well, so district councils can only basically operate with the powers that are given to them by legislation, and as Ashley has pointed out in this paper, this is at the limit of what we can really do. We could chase a closure order, but that's going to be a temporary solution. I think it's, at this stage, would seem to be disproportionate to me, because those people in temporary accommodation have to go somewhere else. The problem's not going to go away, and well, maybe we can talk more about that in debate. But I think this is at the limit of what we can do until government, whichever government gives us more powers, then we can only act in the whatever bounds the law grants to us.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Yeah, which we have to take a share of those, if you will, as an authority, expecting other authorities to do the same. As I mentioned, you have the conditions in terms of the area covered, in terms of the conditions that are covered in Objective B, and the duration of the PSPA of 3 years. Councillor Ferguson, you mentioned a debate over our new to this committee, so
anything.
We have a recommendation to do at the end of the discussions.
Can I suggest that can I propose that we adopt the recommendations that Ashley's
So we've got so if nobody else has any questions or comments, just last opportunity for the councillors. If not, then we'll move to the recommendation. Okay, everybody? Thank you. So, just to react to the recommendation, the committee members are recommended, and by the way, we'll take these recommendations, there are 5 of them altogether, we're going to take recommend to take them on block rather than individually, which I think makes sense, because the first one is an umbrella for the rest, if you will. So, taking them on block, recommendations are, committee members are recommended to decide on whether, number 1, to approve the proposed PSPA for Ainsbury, 2, the proposed PSPA location to be outlined in Appendix A being a suitable location, number 3, the proposed PSPA conditions outlined in Appendix B being suitable, number 4, that the PSPA for Ainsbury should be put in place for 3 years with an annual review, and number 5, to delegate authority to the Chief Operating Officer in consultation with the portfolio holder with responsibility for community services to make minor amendments or variations to the conditions of the scope of this PSPO. So that's the recommendations on block, and
I propose to accept the recommendations, Chair.
thank you, Councillor Terry. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second.
If you will take Councillor Patel. All those in favour, please.
Can I just talk in debate before?
Sure, yeah.
So just to say again, I've met with these residents twice. They're entirely reasonable in their concerns, and I think this is a proportionate thing to do to try and help. And there's essentially 3 problems. There's behaviour outside of the property, which this is addressing. Yeah. There's what happens inside the property, which our housing team are trying to address in collaboration with other authorities. And then there's whether or not this property is being used as a hotel, which is a bone of contention with some residents. Again, that's a planning issue which I'm not really qualified to talk on, but that's the third third arm to this. The first thing to say is that you know, I'm in charge, my portfolio includes housing and homelessness, yeah. I'm very proud of our record in preventing homelessness, keeping people in houses. Always also been very proud in our record of keeping people, well, minimising the number of people in temporary accommodation. So it's one of the things that we report every quarter, and as of March, I think there were 120 households in temporary accommodation across Huntingdonshire. Those are people we place in temporary accommodation, which, you know, I've always been proud of that record, but when you actually see the conditions in which these people live in, it makes you a bit less proud, because, you know, homelessness is awful, yeah. This is quite awful too. It's less awful than sleeping on the street, yeah, but some of this is quite awful for people. And there's not a massive amount we can do about it. So we've got a lot of effort into preventing people having to leave their homes, yeah, which is where we should do it. Also, in order to get people out of temporary accommodation, we need to build more social housing. I think, you know, this authority delivered a record amount of social housing this year, and so that's really helped. So our target is to keep less than 135 people, 135 households in temporary accommodation. We're at 120, which is something to be proud of, but not something to be, you know, enormously proud of, because some of the conditions are awful. So I think we need to do everything we can to help the people who are in temporary accommodation, obviously live fulfilling lives, but also the families that live around the temporary accommodation, because like you've seen some of the responses, so thank you actually to you and your team for doing such an excellent job of, you know, door knocking and canvassing to get these responses. So, you know, nearly 50 responses is exceptional, but the message is very clear that people feel intimidated, they feel scared, and that's not good enough. So I think this is the best we can do at the moment. I think that going into a foreclosure order would be premature, because we'll just be moving those people to somewhere else. Yeah? And one of the things, if you're going to place people in temporary accommodation, what you can't do is stick them in a village with no amenities, no transportation. So they have to be in towns, have to be in town centres, and there's a very limited number of places. And once again, this is a private business. Even if we didn't put people there, then other authorities still could, and there's not much we could do to do it other than perhaps going through the route of the closure order. So it's a difficult situation to deal with, and I completely understand residents. I'm very pleased with the work that ASCI and the enforcement team have done in bringing this forward and also communicating with residents. And I think, you know, we're just going to have to try it, and like I said, I'm going to review it monthly with the residents themselves. And I'm confident that we're going to get an improvement, because lots of these problems are basically centred around rough sleeping in the churchyards, and this gives us the power to turn what is a civil offence into a criminal offence, and gives the policemen the ability to do it. So I fully support this. Some of the residents might think it's not enough, but I think it's the most we can do in these circumstances.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burton. Any comments on?
No, sorry, I agree with what Councillor Ferguson said. I mean, my only other recommendation is that this comes back to our panel, that we keep an eye on it as a panel, because I think, as Councillor Banks says, it's very serious. We've heard about the effects it's having on residents, and also let's not forget the people that are, as you said, Councillor Ferguson, that are being housed there temporarily. So I do think that's quite an important thing, that it comes back to our committee. Thank you.
Councillor Calvin.
Thank you very much, Chair. I agree totally with Councillor Jordan. I just think that we should have a sixth recommendation to confirm that it will come back to this committee going forward several months or whenever the next meeting is, so that we know, hopefully, so that we've got an idea of how it's progressing, because I think that's the only thing that's missing in those recommendations.
Yeah.
Support that. Do you want to propose an amendment, Councillor Gordon?
I'm quite happy to propose that amendment. We'll come back to this committee.
Okay. Sorry, would you like Councillor Cabaret?
No, I just wanted to agree with what other councillors are saying. It's important to note that, and also I think it's important as well for other authorities which are not Huntingdonshire District Council to note what we are discussing here, if they can do the same in their local authorities, because it's their people who are causing issues.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Calvin, you wish to make an amendment to the...
Yes.
Sorry, Councillor Banks first.
Yeah. I agree with Councillor what you said. But personally, if I was to go down my street and have this fear that these residents have, it must be awful walking there every day. It's not just one-off. like a festival or something. It's every day. They must be absolutely terrified that something's going to happen, not just to them, but their loved ones. So I think, obviously, what we've all said, I think is in accordance that we should do, and if there's a proposal, I'd like to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bax. So, yes, so bear in mind, Councillor Garland, that currently, yes, we've got a 3-year period over this, and there is a recourse for annual review at the moment. So beyond the annual review that's already in place in item 4, you're proposing that there's a specific thing to bring back.
Do you want to suggest that you have an update at the next meeting, and then we see where the situation is, and then consider on what basis to have updates at future meetings? Yeah.
Okay, so rather than adding 6 items or recommendations,
Well, we can add an additional recommendation to say an update at the next meeting.
Yeah,
that's fine.
then we, at that meeting, we then determine how often we need to come to this meeting. Because I think we need to know how it's progressing.
Fine, okay, so,
The next meeting is October, so.
yeah, so Claire, just want to play back what the recommendation will be.
Okay, so you're going to approve the proposed PSPO for Amesbury.
Yeah.
You're going to approve the proposed PSPO location as outlined in Appendix A as being suitable. You're going to approve the proposed PSPO conditions as outlined in Appendix B as being suitable. You're going to agree that the PSPO for Amesbury should be put in place for 3 years with annual review. You're going to delegate authority to the Chief Operating Officer in consultation with the portfolio holder with responsibility for community services to make minor amendments or variations to the conditions and scope of the PSPO, and you're going to request a further update on the situation be presented to the committee's next meeting for further consideration by the committee.
What date is that, Claire?
October the 16th.
Thank you, Claire. So we need to take that amendment to the original motion. And,
So those are the amended recommendations.
So we're going to hit to, excuse me, the second of the amendment, please.
I'll second it.
Thank you, actually, Councillor Patel. I can see all those in favour of the amended recommendations. Thank you. That's unanimous. Lovely. So that then becomes a substantive motion with the 6 recommendations all together. So can I now see Councillor Taylor has proposed that. We have a second of the substantive. Councillor Banks, thank you. And all those in favour of the substantive, please. And once again, that is unanimous.
Unanimous.
Thank you very much, councillors. Thank you, everybody. And that concludes the business of the meeting this afternoon. Thank you very much for your time and attendance. Close the meeting now.
Thank you.